as equal staff members so they can provide you with information on services that are available in Victoria. We are also about to commence the live streaming. Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Akec Majur Chuot. I play football at the Richmond Football Club. I'm also a community advocate and I'm a business owner at Safari Boutique Australia. Welcome to those joining online. Today we'll be discussing family violence, and those can be difficult conversations to have and to hear. If today brings anything up for you and you need support, please visit aresafeathome.org.au to find support services in your state. I would now like to welcome Wurundjeri Elder Tony Garvey to conduct the Welcome to Country.
Thank you very much for that warm welcome. Much appreciated, and thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's very important for our culture and going forward. I'd just like to start by saying Wurundjeri to everyone. So Wurundjeri in the Wurundjeri Wurrung language means welcome. So welcome to all Indigenous and non-Indigenous people here today. Also, I'd just like to say I'm very proud and honoured to be here representing my people, the Wurundjeri Wurrung people and the Wandin family. So I'm a direct descendant to the Wandin family. My great-grandfather was the last Narangirta on Coranderk after King Arrow. Narangirta means the last head tribesman, so he was the last head tribesman living on the land. My uncle, which is my mum's oldest brother, he was the last born on Coranderk on the mission. And my granny Jemima, which is my great granny Jemima, actually was the last person to die on the mission, refused to leave to the colonial settlement. Just went to about 2 days after getting moved on physically. She went to bed one night and just said, I've done enough, and passed away. So that's the way it was. So the Wurundjeri people are also a part of the Kulin Nation. So Kulin means man. In the Kulin Nation, there was 5 language groups. There was the Wannerong to the west, the Coorong, who were the westerly neighbours to the Wannerong, Tunnerong to the northeast, Bunurong to the southwest, and the Wurrung of the Wurundjeri territory that we stand on here today. Wurundjeri lies within the cities of Melbourne. It extends to the mountains of the Great Dividing Range, south to the Yarra River, west to the Werribee River, and east to Mount Dorport. The Wurundjeri people have a social totem is Bunjil the eagle. Bunjil represents spiritual powers throughout many parts of Australia. Bunjil taught all the laws about life, behaviour and ceremonies. Make sure that our culture will continue for all walks of life throughout Australia. Bunjil is referred to as the creator of mankind. Bunjil created great people from the land, that is why we call the land our mother, or mother of creation. Never can the land be taken away. The land will always belong to Aboriginal people. We're part of the land, and the land is part of us. Our story is similar to yours. Yours is by your chosen faith, ours is by the dream time. We both have creators and beliefs, and ours is Bunjil. It is a traditional custom of the Australian Aboriginal communities to be asked and give permission for people to enter their land. And today, you are now joined with me to honour the spirits of my ancestors, past, present, and emerging, who have nurtured this land for over 60,000 years. And we, as the custodians of the land, offer our hearty welcome to the land and hope that together as citizens of this beautiful country, we can build, develop, and unite a stronger nation for all people. And I'll just close in my Wurrung language, which is Wurundjeri, Wandu, Wurundjeri, Balak, Gil, and Kulibik, which means she's the most welcome to the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. And I'd just also like to say I'm again very supportive of this event today, and I think it's very important that this message does get out. Look, I went through living a hell of a life for about 20 years myself. Through my mum's fella, which he was a very abusive fella, and my mum lived trauma and went through all this, right through. I can tell you some really sad stories, but I won't be out live, so I won't put it out there. But yeah, I just let you know I'm feeling the pain in the room for everybody who said respect this today. So yeah, thank you very much for inviting me here today.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony, Rotary Elder, and for those words of wisdom. Thank you so much. I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm on today, pay my respect to elders past, present, and pay my respect to Tony. Safe and Equal is a peak body for the Specialist Family Violence Services in Victoria, and first launched the Are You Safe at Home campaign in 2020. A special thanks to Safe and Equal for not only launching this year's Are You Safe at Home Day, but also hosting this event today. Thanks to everyone for attending today, especially to the survivor advocate, Elvis and Mishka. I'm looking forward to our discussion today. I'm delighted to be here today because I am also somebody who has gone through experience of family violence. And to come and hear your beautiful stories of how you survived and now advocating for others is very inspiring. So thank you. Today, May 10th, is Are You Safe at Home Day. It is an opportunity to start a conversation to end family violence. We all have an important decision to make. Are we going to be bystanders, or are we going to stand up for people that need so that we can end family violence? This event marks the first year of Are You Safe at Home Day. It's all about breaking down barriers and taboos around talking about family violence. Safe and Equal has developed Are You Safe at Home campaign in 2020 as a way to reach people with an important information about family violence during the first round of the pandemic lockdowns. Since then, it has evolved beyond the COVID-19 context. The Are You Safe at Home initiatives provide victims, survivors with information about what family violence is, ways to stay safe, and where to find support. It is also important for friends to provide, it also provides friends, family, and community members with information about how to respond appropriately if they suspect somebody or know somebody who may be unsafe at home. To help us launch this day, I'm delighted to introduce the Honourable Gabrielle Williams, Victoria Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, Prevention of Family Violence, and Minister for Women. Please welcome.
Thank you very much for that warm introduction, Akec, for being our MC here today and giving all your pizzazz to that role. So thank you. Before I begin, please let me acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're currently gathered, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders, past and present. And a special thank you to Tony Garvey for that beautiful welcome to country, for sharing the story of your family's connection to this place, and in particular the connection to Corranderk and all that is represented, and the trauma and ongoing pain that colonisation has caused for your people, your family, and for being so open in sharing that with us. Sovereignty was never ceded, and it's really important that we acknowledge that, particularly now, as Victoria embarks upon truth-telling and treaty, the first jurisdiction in Australia to commit to both of those elements, and with truth-telling currently live and underway with the Bureau of Justice Commission here in state in place, and and us having the fortune to hear so many stories like yours, Tony, and stories of your family and others who were so heavily impacted, and yet to this day share that strength and resilience and share in your culture with the rest of us, so that we can all move forward with a brighter future and a shared future, and one that we can all be proud of. So thank you, and thank you also for sharing your personal experience of family violence, which obviously for today is extremely significant, and to have you pour your own heart into the purpose of today is really powerful and meaningful. So thank you. I also want to acknowledge those who have lost their lives as a consequence of family violence, and we know there are far too many of them, and we're reminded all too frequently of the importance of the work that we're all committed to. I know, like me, you, or all of you, are probably too very tired and sobered by the fact that we can open the newspapers weekly, sometimes more than that, and learn of yet more tragedy and more deaths that are entirely preventable. And it is a reminder for me how important it is, the work that we're committed to. I also want to acknowledge those who continue to live with the trauma of family violence each and every day, and those advocates among them who use those experiences to make our system better, to make our community a safer place to be. And I think it's really important that we're not flippant about that contribution, because it comes at great personal cost to use your own trauma, to relive that trauma, so that others might not have to experience that as well. So a special thank you also, of course, to our speakers here today, Elvis and Mishka, for sharing your stories, your experiences, so that we can genuinely start to make inroads into addressing this issue. And it's also worth noting to that end that victim survivors of family violence are very much at the heart of our reforms here in Victoria, and need to be. That is a voice that is extremely important to us being able to get this reform right, and to be able to inform not only the policy responses, but that important prevention work that we know that will stop violence before it starts, helping us better understand the warning signs, better understand how to have these important conversations, which we are here to discuss today. To Tanya Faha, a CEO of Safe and Equal, who is an absolute powerhouse in this space, who has been such a strong advocate since taking on her role, and I can speak to that personally, given I am often on the receiving end of Tanya's advocacy, and it is of enormous assistance to me. It makes my job a lot easier when I have someone of the calibre of Tanya able to equip me with what I need to know to be able to take that advocacy to the Treasurer in particular. So thank you, Tanya, for all that you continue to do, and all that you have done in the most difficult of times, which is probably a nice way to start, to recognise the enormous contribution of so many of you here today and across our family violence sector, who have continued to navigate really complex challenges posed by the pandemic, and they're not done yet. It has been an extremely difficult 2 years for everyone in our community, and I think it's also important to note the particular challenges that have been posed for women and children in our community experiencing family violence, and of course the services that support them. For many of you, both online and in the room, who have been doing that important work, I'm really conscious that over the last couple of years that has required you to bring that gravity of your work into your own homes, and in many cases expose your own families to that trauma that you're working with each and every day. And that is a huge cost, but I think it also is a demonstration of the enormous commitment that we have across our family violence sector, particularly over the last couple of years, to give even more of yourselves to make sure that we're able to meet the needs of the community during a really tough time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It's a really long way, a long way of saying thank you. I think today is a really clear demonstration of the commitment and dedication of hard-working prevention of family violence organisations to innovate and adapt, particularly over the last couple of years when we were all forced to do things differently. Against the backdrop of a global pandemic, Safe and Equal developed a life-saving campaign, and I say that quite genuinely, and it was one that a lot of thought was put into, and not a lot of time was able to be spent in many respects. This was an urgent response, but at the same time a very well thought out response. And that campaign started with a really simple question: are you safe at home? And I know personally the materials that were generated out of this campaign have been of enormous use to my teams in our community engagement and right across government for the people and the organisations that we interact with, from MPs' offices to media outlets to constituents writing in concern for a friend or a neighbour. These user-friendly resources really can change lives and have changed lives, and of course can save lives as well. So it really is a great privilege to be able to be here for the inaugural Are You Safe at Home Day. And this important campaign, I think, highlights the critical role that family, friends and colleagues play in recognising the signs and symptoms of family violence, but more than that, goes that extra step to providing them with information on how to most appropriately respond if they suspect someone is unsafe at home. And I think that goes to the point that Akec was making earlier around, do we just want to be bystanders, or do we want to be empowered to actually play our part? And this is, for me, what this campaign really represents. By building understanding of those warning signs of family violence, this campaign is increasing people's confidence, I think, to start that conversation with someone that they are concerned about, a conversation that, as I've said, could well save a life. I think by targeting workplaces and organisations, we're inviting them to be a part of the solution to ending family violence in our community, of not seeing themselves as sitting separate to these issues. Because where you have people, where people are is where this conversation needs to be. It's as simple as that. There is no place that is inappropriate for these interventions to be taking place. And I think building that whole community's responsibility for tackling these issues is really important. Work, as we know, workplaces might be the only place someone experiencing family violence is able to speak up and ask for help. Raising awareness of the signs and starting these conversations where those opportunities exist is really critical. We will no longer allow family violence to be hidden behind closed doors, and each of us has a role to play in bringing it to an end. And that's why we embarked upon a Royal Commission into Family Violence back in 2015, which seems like a million years ago, and we've committed to implementing all of its recommendations. There were 227 of them. We've currently included 204, but this is not a box-ticking exercise. This is about making sure that we're building a system that works and that we have genuine prevention efforts in place that are stopping violence before it starts. So since that Royal Commission, the Victorian Government has invested more than $3.7 billion towards ending family violence. To put that into context, because I'm always really conscious, not being a numbers person myself, that you give a big figure and it's really hard to know whether that's a lot or not. But so to put it in context, that equates to more than all of the other jurisdictions in Australia combined, and more than the Commonwealth as well, just here in Victoria in that last 6 years since the Royal Commission handed down its report. And that investment has gone to delivering meaningful and lasting change to the way our community understands, prevents and responds to family violence. And we want this to be change that is embedded, that is here to stay, is long lasting, so that we can start to see improvements on these measures that sadly have been tracking in the wrong direction for far too long. So as we are rebuilding Victoria's family violence system, we're starting to see that reporting rates are increasing, and that might seem like a negative outcome. But we've always anticipated this and known that the increased rates of reporting are actually a good thing, because it means that people are reaching out for assistance and that we can intervene to assist, that we actually know where people are and we can put in the right interventions and supports around them to keep them safe. This trend of increased reporting started prior to the pandemic, despite what some of the media coverage will tell you. I think in part it's been due to a greater awareness of family violence, with far more public discussion on its impact than I think has ever been the case before, and I think a part of that was generated by the Royal Commission itself. We're far more conscious now, I think, of the impact on the lives of women, children and many other members of the Victorian community of family violence. And the community at large, I think, from that public discussion now has a better understanding of what family violence is. In large part, I've got to say, due to campaigns like this, that hasn't happened organically. That has been driven by a sector that is incredibly passionate about this. And also, another factor in increasing reporting is increased confidence in the system. is a growing confidence in our support system and also improved access to support. That's not to say we don't have a lot more work to do. We certainly do. There is a long way to go before we can truly say we think we've met this issue in the bud. And we expect to see that trend of increasing reporting rates continue, sadly. But what it's effectively showing us is a more accurate reflection of the levels of family violence that exist in our community. And I think that's something that we need to reflect on, that all those years ago, when we were trying to model demand and what we thought the true demand in our community looked like, we were by definition trying to model something that wasn't visible, that was hidden behind closed doors. And as we've rolled out our reform agenda, what it's enabled us to do is get a much clearer understanding of the scale of the problem. I think it's fair to say the scale has surpassed any expectations or modelling that was done. And that in some respects is very depressing and very sobering, but in other respects it is great for policymakers. It's great information for policymakers to have because it allows us to better respond to it. And Safe and Equal have been a great partner with us in that work, with a better understanding that data. So I'm really proud that we've continued to continue our record investment into preventing and responding to family violence issues. We committed over $240 million to further this cause. We're continuing to break new ground here in Victoria. We're pioneering, say where, it's the sector that's doing the pioneering, new evidence-based and effective strategies to end the cycle of violence. Not only informing, I've got to say, practice here in Australia, and it is the work that's being done by Safe and Equal and others here in Victoria, but it is also informing practice globally. A lot of eyes on us at the moment as we embark upon this important work, and with each lesson we learn, and that is a lesson that can be applied to women all across to help women all across the world. And I think that's something that we should all be really proud of. Safe and Equal have and its predecessor organisations, I should say, it's a fairly new brand, have a very long and proud history of championing change and driving an end to all forms of family violence and violence against women. I want to thank Tanya and the team for your dedication to this work, for your passion for innovation. You never rest on your laurels. You're always looking for a new way to do things and for us to be better. And you drive others around you to be better, including the government as well. And I'm very grateful for that. So despite the adversity of the last 2 years, your ongoing commitment to ending family violence in Victoria has only got stronger, and to so many others even across the family violence sector and related sectors as well. I know this that applies to you as well. So thank you. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to know that this is just the beginning of the Are You Safe at Home day and the campaign's life. But I expect that this will continue to be a really strong feature of the discussions that we're driving in the community now and into the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Minister Williams, and your team and everything that you guys are doing to make sure that family violence is eradicated once and for all. So thank you. I'm now honoured to share this space today with these survivor advocates and thank them for their time and for sharing their experiences. When talking about family violence, it's imperative and necessary to ensure that their voices, the voices of those who live those experiences, are at the forefront of the conversations, as they are the expert in their experiences and what they need to stay safe. Today, I'm joined by Elvis, who is a youth advocate, who has managed to overcome very difficult circumstances and inspired many with his advocacy for social justice. Elvis has worked and spoken publicly in many roles, addressing mental health, homelessness, family violence, and LGBTQI+ community issues. Elvis is a member of the Safe and Equal Expert Advisory Panel. Elvis will be sharing his reflection about the importance of asking the question, are you safe at home? For young people from multicultural backgrounds in the LGBTQI+ communities and above. So thank you so much for coming today, Elvis. We're also joined by Mishka. Mishka's perpetrator was convicted of serious and protected family violence, offending in mid-2020. She's also a member of the Safe and Equal Expert Advisory Panel. Mishka advocates for systemic reforms in response to family violence, in particular in the respect of police response and accountability, the recognition of child victim survivors as victims in their own right, and educating and empowering bystanders. Mishka will be sharing her insight into the role of workplaces and co-lead in supporting victim survivors. So thank you both for being here today. I'll start with you, Elvis. Family violence doesn't discriminate and can often impact people of all genders, sexualities, and background. Elvis, as somebody who has experienced family violence and homophobia as a young person, what would it mean to you if somebody asked about your safety at home?
Thank you. Thank you so much. It means everything. The short answer, it means everything. When I was experiencing family violence, I was never told that was family violence, or I was not aware that was family violence. I was just thinking, I'm just having some issues with my family and we are not agreeing on a few things. And that's what I was thinking for 4 years. Are you guys able to hear me? For 4 years, and no one told me that that was family violence, and so it was difficult, and it was so everyone jumped into when services was providing me support. Everyone jumped into looking for like mental health services or housing and things like that, but no one actually acknowledged that experience was family violence. And so it was difficult until I was told after 4 years when I was talking to one of the support worker, and he told me, "Oh, that's a family violence experience. Do you want to seek support?" It was already 4 years. The damage was done. But I'm very grateful that that person brought to my attention, okay, this is family violence, and a lot of young people don't know what family violence is, because the term is not common, and at the same time, and especially in multicultural community, you don't talk about it. You just live with it, and you just deal with it, and you don't talk about it. So all these terms like family violence, domestic violence, homelessness, mental health, I learned in Australia. I was not aware of these terms because unfortunately, this is just not talked about. And if someone would have asked me, that would definitely help me, and I might have opened up about my experience, and maybe that would have fast-tracked my recovery. And that is really, I think it's really important, and community can play a big role in supporting people, and especially LGBTI community. As a member of the LGBTI community, there's not much support from multicultural communities for LGBTI people, so it's really important that whoever it is just step up and ask this question: Are you safe at home? Because the stats are really high when it comes to family violence for LGBTI people, and that was one of the main reasons that I experienced family violence. I experienced family violence when I came out, and things turned completely upside down for me. And So yeah, the short answer is definitely, yeah, I'm really happy to see a campaign like this, and thanks to Safe and Equal, because I think this will start the conversation that we are hoping, and I hope community members step up and ask the question, are you safe? And yeah.
To follow up on what you just said, especially coming from a multicultural community and the advocacy that you've done as a young person, are you starting to see that young people are understanding what family violence is? And are you seeing that they're having these conversations themselves now?
Uh, I would definitely say that space is changing. 10 years ago, when I was experiencing it, was totally different, and now it's services are talking about it, or services asking this question when they are doing an intake form for young people. Do you want family violence support, or are you experiencing family violence? But still, it's not that common. It's not that common, and I know young people, my friends who experience family violence. Sometimes they try to avoid it as well because of the stigma related to it, and it's not a common thing. It's not a common question people ask. So yeah, it's changing, and campaigns like this will definitely help reduce the stigma around this topic. And so it's important. Uh, and my colleague Mishka is going to talk about workplace and the importance of it. So I think it's really important that we take this campaign everywhere so that we try to reduce the stigma around this topic of asking the question. Because I always want to, I said this in many of my talks, that I want to live in a world where being vulnerable, I can't pronounce that word, but you guys get it right, is not seen as incapable. Because most of the time people don't talk about their hardships at workplaces or friends, because you're suddenly seen as someone who can't deal with your own things, you know what I mean? And campaigns like this will definitely help reduce the stigma in the community and start that conversation.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm going to jump on to Mishka and ask you a question.
Sorry.
Often, work might be the only place a person experiencing family violence can safely speak about their experiences and ask for help. Mishka, what role did your workplace play in supporting your journey towards the safety of you and your children?
Sort of played two roles really. So the first was, and I think it's a really important point to make that Elvis has made too, and that our earlier speakers made. Quite often the last person to realise they're a family violence victim is the victim themselves. And my colleagues realised I was suffering family violence well before I did. So my ex would contact me multiple times during the day, and I'm talking like 30, 40 text messages a day, wanting to know where I was, wanting to know, why did I spend 10 minutes at lunch instead of 5 minutes at lunch? Was I having lunch with someone? He controlled what I wore. He would show up on his days off from work at my workplace. I was getting stalked. There was this really obsessive behaviour, and if I bought a piece of clothing he didn't like, he'd destroy it. My colleagues all knew this, and they were going, that's red flags, that's not okay. And I was like, no, his ex cheated on him, allegedly. And that's why he's a bit paranoid. He's just overprotective. He's worried about me. He loves me. It's all right. He's a good guy. And they're like, really? And I work in a very, very blokey environment, which is something I'd like to sort of speak about a bit later today too, because I think a lot of men feel that they can't speak up, but there really was no one else in my workplace to speak up because there's very few females. I'm sort of like one of the token females in my then workplace. So these guys were like, hey, if I texted my missus 40 times a day and told her what she could wear, I'd be sleeping on the couch, and not at my house, at my mum's house, because she would have kicked me to the curb. Like, what are you doing? And these were the kind of sort of comments I was getting from the guys. They weren't judging him, but they were just making observations. And I'd always be defensive, going, no, it's fine. You don't understand. It's different. And then things were escalating, and I've been hiding the violence for a long time. And makeup covers bruises, but it doesn't cover swelling. And I got beaten so badly few times where my face was swollen up and my eye was swollen over, and no amount of concealer stick is covering that thing. And my colleagues were like, this is not good, what's going on? We're really worried about you. And we're really worried. I remember my boss pulled me aside and said, I don't want to see some homicide cop talking about you on the news. And it's not about me, but it's totally about me. I don't want to see you on the news. Like, what do I want to do something. I'm a solutions guy. Tell me what I need to do to keep you safe. He didn't go in and try and rescue me. He didn't tell me to go to the police. He was like, I'll give me the playbook. I want the playbook. I want you to tell me how to get you safe, because this is not okay. And I'm worried about you, and I'm really worried about your kids. And I had another colleague, and sort of reminded me a bit of Tony, actually, with what he disclosed earlier. He said, I was your son, and it's horrible. And my mum was trying to protect me from the violence, and she didn't know I saw everything. And she was blaming herself, and it's not her fault, and it's not your fault. But if you can't do it for you, can you just do it for him? Because he needs you to help him, and his dad's not going to help him. Can you? And that really guilt tripped me. And I thought it was really clever too, because he's grown up with family violence and he knows how we operate as victims is guilt. So he pressed exactly the same button as my ex did, but that was a massive wake-up call for me too. So I had this going on all the time, but at the same time, I also had, because I work in quite a bogan workplace, the guys who would come past my desk every single day and go, hey mate, your footy team totally sucks, but how are you going? Seriously, 1-5, how's it going? And I'd always go, oh no, it's 4 out of 5, it's good. And they'd be like, yeah, right. And they dragged me out for coffee Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every single day. And as things got worse, I lived for those coffees, I lived for those interactions. And I started eventually, because they kept asking questions about my welfare, telling me they wanted me to get safe. And I was like, no, I'm not a family violence victim. It's a misunderstanding. It's fine. It's not a problem. I started opening up. I started disclosing. And things escalated a lot. So my ex would come home from work. He works as a first responder. He would have been to disgusting crime scenes, domestic violence call-outs where there was a homicide. He'd come home, he couldn't process what he'd dealt with. He would drink and he would beat the crap out of me. And the excuse was always that I'd caused it because I back-chatted him, or I hadn't ironed his shirts right, or the kids had made a mess, or the kids were being noisy, and I was a crap mum. It was always my fault. And I was so broken down over the years that I'd sort of ceased to exist, and I was the person who was responsible for everybody else's emotions. I was the person who was responsible for everyone else's bad behaviour. I was the person who was responsible for everyone else's misery. It was my fault. So what my colleagues were telling me at work was at odds with this, that no, this is not your fault. This is not okay behaviour. As blokes, we wouldn't behave like this. And over time, the weight of their opinions kind of grew, and the roof caved in and the light came in, and I started seeing things for what they were. So finally, when things escalated to my ex making a firearms threat against us and strangling me unconscious and bashing me quite badly, I finally called the police. And I spoke to my boss that week, and I felt terrible that I called the police. I was really conflicted. I wanted to be safe, but I also felt like I'd thrown a mentally ill man I still loved under the bus. And I remember him, and all of my colleagues just got around me. I had so many messages like, we've got your back, your job is safe. Just get yourself safe. Tell us what we need to do to get you safe. You're really valued here, and we don't want to see you on the news. And that was just a message I constantly got. And that made all the difference to me. Because I think what people don't understand about, family violence is it's not the police who save you. It's not some grand act of rescue. Because if you pulled me out of that relationship a couple of years earlier, I would have gone straight back, because I lost myself. But what my colleagues did, what those good bystanders did, is they slowly built me up, and they showed me that I was valued, that I was cared about. And they also showed me that the behaviour was not my fault and it wasn't okay. And that gave me the strength to save myself. It gave me the resolve to save myself and to hold him to account. And if it weren't for those bystanders, my ex was charged, as you said before, with very serious protracted offending. And the judge, I remember, in the first court hearing before the appeal, said this is at the very serious end of non-fatal offending. Now, I don't think he would have been charged with that if it hadn't been for the bystanders. I think he would have been charged with a homicide offence, and he'd probably still be in the slot. That's what would have happened. And the police didn't save me. Good bystanders saved me. My bogans that I work with, they saved me. With their hand-fisted comments and, just being decent people and showing that they cared. And they didn't know that I've been alienated from my family. There was no one else in my life who was going to speak up. No one. It was them. And they could have gone, oh, this is a woman's problem. Or they could have said HR should deal with it, or it's a personal problem. Her work performance is fine. We don't need to intervene. But they didn't. They stepped up and said something. And I had no family support. I wasn't allowed to have friends. It was so important. And I owe them so much, and I still keep in contact with them. I can't speak strongly enough about how important it is to be a good bystander, because that's the solution to family violence.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing those experiences. And but there are so many issues that we have in this country with bystanders, and for you bystanders, people that work with you, are the people that contributed to making sure that you are safe. You are not just you by yourself, but you and your children. And the main people that are supposed to be protecting us, which is the police, are the ones that are doubting you. They're the ones that are asking you the question. In your advocacy work and all the work that you're doing at the moment, are you seeing the changes and the police being held accountable for the fact that they need to do a better job at protecting the victims of the family violence?
I see incremental changes, but not enough. And I think a large part of it is, part of it is police culture and the failures of police accountability, and there's just been an inquiry on that. But part of it is also the adversarial system that we have that's event-based. So they're not trained to look at courses of conduct. And when the divvy van comes out, they don't know the history. They're not mapping the behaviour of both people. And so quite often, particularly with poor communities, they're misidentifying victims as perpetrators. They're not seeing children. They're not doing L17s for the children. They're getting things wrong. And, they're getting better training. It's coming through in some of the younger ones. The older ones, definitely not. And I think we really need to stop seeing police as the solution to family violence, because they're not. When they came out for me after I've been strangled and bashed, it's too late. Obviously the police did end up charging him and he got convicted and he unsuccessfully. But it's people had spoken up earlier for him in his workplace. And he was a police officer, so people knew what he was like, and it was like, oh well, she's probably a B word, or people endorsed his behaviour with their silence and also with their locker room culture. And I would see it all the time at police station events too. The culture is slowly changing, but there's not enough good bystanders speaking up, and I think it's very hard in some of those workplaces for good bystanders to speak up. And police have said to me before, look, it can be very blokey, so it's hard. And I was like, well, I work in a super blokey industry, and my colleagues spoke up. And you can, you have to, and bystanders have to speak up with perpetrators and with victims. And it's not going to be solved unless you do it at both ends.
Thank you. Do you want to add, Elvis?
Thank you. Thank you, Mishka. I agree. I strongly agree with what you said, that police culture, I think space is changing. But we say this in Arabic. I don't know how I say it in English. It's changing as fast as an ant walk. That's true. And I remember when I was experiencing domestic violence, the police officer just in the other room, which I can hear, is like, oh, I just can't understand these gay relationships. And so police is definitely not the solution to family violence. Yes, it is changing, so it's good to acknowledge that the culture is changing, but what a rubbish excuse when whoever says that it's a blokey space. What do you mean by a blokey space? You know what I mean? You're there to protect everyone, and yeah, police is not a solution to family violence.
Yeah, they have to get the perpetrators out of the ranks too, because that doesn't help with the culture. But I think, you can stop it getting to the police if people speak up. Family, friends, colleagues, if you see a red flag, it doesn't do any harm in calling it out. It doesn't do any harm in saying to someone, hey, I'm a bit worried about you, you're okay. The worst thing you're going to look like is maybe a bit of an idiot when they push back and go, what are you talking about? I'm fine. But you've planted a seed, and you don't know you've planted that seed, and all that cumulative weight builds up, and someone eventually sees things for what they are. And same with the perpetrator. If the perpetrator is constantly getting told, hey mate, it's not the 80s anymore, you can't say that kind of stuff about women. Or you can't, don't speak to your missus like that. Like, if I spoke to my missus like that, I'd be on the curb. Like, that sort of little checks, doesn't have to be a confrontation. But that also weighs up with the perpetrator too, and changing their behaviour, changing what they say. And when you change what you say, you start to change how you behave. And that's massively important too. I know we're talking about asking women, are you safe at home? But we also need to have a talk about bystanders with perpetrators too, because we've all got a role to play. And, you know, it's a bit awkward when you have that conversation with someone and go, mate, no. But that's all you have to say is, mate, no. Yeah,
So spot on, and I think that's such powerful messages and in this conversation. I really hope that you are that person now with the tools to be able to take that anywhere that you go and identify that and have the conversations, because we do need to have those conversations. I have one more question for you, Elvis. You had recently had an experience where you found yourself, you had a friend who asked you about your safety and provided support. What did this mean to you? And, how was this different from your past experiences?
It was very different, and this was one of them was two people actually, and one of them is my mentor, and the other one is my colleague. They both had. I felt comfortable opening up to them, and this colleague always checks on me how I'm going, and so it was important. It felt like there is someone there to care for me, sort of a thing. So I feel I am not judged for what I'm going through, and it not just there to listen to me and so that, because sometimes what happens when you are hearing from a victim and survivor, the story they might not be giving you a complete story, and so people start having these curiosity questions. It's like the story doesn't make sense, or so the best thing that one can do, and what my colleague did, was just listen to me and did not ask me 10,000 curiosity questions for her own trying to paint the picture or understand what's going on. And then this colleague put me in touch immediately with one of the service that can help me, which is Rainbow Door. And so I felt like I came out of that situation much quicker with less trauma than what I have been through with family violence. So yeah, having support definitely help, and I think people can. The thing is that people should just be there for, just be a good listener. And I think that's one of the key messages of this campaign, is just be a good listener, be there for someone, and just listen to what they are going through. My mentor and my colleague, just being there for me helped me move on. Otherwise, it was really tough time that I would have completely break down and might have taken time from work that I do, and so having that extra support or someone just asking me how I am, checking on me regularly, and it's not the job of my colleague to check on me, you know what I mean, but she stepped up and she asked that question, so that I just felt supported.
Thank you, Elvis. I've got one last question for the both of you in regards to this campaign. We've seen a lot of campaigns in Australia come and go. What's your aspiration, and what are the things that you're looking for this campaign to really achieve over the next couple of years that it's in place? Because it is a very important conversation. And what your colleague said before about we wake up every day and there's a woman that has life has been ended in the hands of a family member, and the outrage, it grows amongst the advocates, but then it just kind of dies, and then the next day the same thing. What do you want to see with this campaign, and where do you want this campaign to go?
I want to see this causing a lot of conversations like those that were in my workplace, and I think we've probably got some later on some quotes from my colleagues too, of what they said to me. So almost the playbook that they wrote themselves. I'd like to see more people saying something and more people educated about what the red flags are, because I think that's the key. If we all know what the red flags are, and then we all feel empowered to speak up, and it's normal to speak up, it becomes abnormal not to speak up and to walk past it. That's what I want to see. Because if we start doing that, we start calling out perpetrators and it becomes normalised to call out and identify red flags. Victims will identify themselves as victims earlier, perpetrators will adjust their behaviour earlier, and people won't end up like me, getting dragged through the criminal justice system for 2 years. People won't end up with the level of trauma that my children have and that Elvis has, that half the people in this room have. If this campaign is successful, and I think it can be successful, and this is the start, we have to have these conversations. That's what I want to say.
I think this campaign is launched by a peak body of Victoria, but I feel like this campaign, you can relate with this campaign in any part of the world, and especially the countries that I'm coming from. There is a lot of family violence and domestic violence, especially towards women in Middle Eastern countries. So this campaign is relatable everywhere, and I really hope that Are You Safe at Home is not just limited to Victoria but go internationally, and we start this conversation internationally. You're right that sometimes campaigns start and die out eventually, but I think this is something really important, and this has a lot of potential because it will encourage that community conversations. And if I can, as we talked a little bit about police today, if I can take this platform and challenge police to host a Are You Safe at Home event at the police, Victoria Police or Federal Police. And so I think it's really important that we use platforms to call these organizations out and challenge them publicly to host Are You Safe at Home event. And that shows their commitment, because to prove that they are committed to this issue, prove that they are supportive of women's safety, young people, children, and LGBTI of safety. Like, no one deserves and no one chooses to go through family violence and domestic violence. So it's really important. I'm definitely going to use my platform to tag services and organization that I think should definitely have oppose this campaign.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Elvis, and thank you to Mishka for sharing experiences, opinions, and your thoughts today. So thank you both. So the amazing conversation that we just had shows how important it is to talk about family violence and to offer support when somebody is ready to talk about their experiences. For me, I was in a similar position as what Elvis just spoke about. Not knowing what family violence was, I just saw it as something that was accepted in the community, as something that your older brothers or your older siblings do, to keep you in line. And growing up in a refugee camp, there was family violence everywhere, and I didn't know that was going to escalate coming to a country like Australia. And it wasn't, it was small, and it just grew. When my older brother used his authority as a father figure, because I didn't really have a father figure. And it wasn't until he beat me up, he beat the crap out of me. He beat me up so much that he was potentially going to end my life that day. And I was on the floor, and he sat on top of me, and he was punching me. And I just remembered going, wow, if I get out of this today and the neighbors call the police, I'm going to have to hold them accountable, because I don't want to be, first of all, die in the hands of somebody that is supposed to be my brother, somebody who's supposed to be protecting me. But also, this has been allowed to happen for so many years, not only to myself, but to my sisters, and there's so many people in my community. And I took a stand. I put a restraining order on my brother, and it was a big shock. It sent shockwaves in my house. And everyone was like trying to talk me out of it. Everyone's like, okay, you can't put a restraining order on your brother, you can't do X, Y, Z. And I said, no, my life is so much valuable. Like, I am on this planet for a reason, and I'm not gonna die in the hands of somebody. So I put a restraining order on him, and I gave myself a week. I gave myself a week to think about it, and I said the only way that I'm gonna be dropping the restraining order is we need to have a family meeting, because I see good in him. I see him, he's a good person, but I don't want this to happen to my nieces. And I held them accountable, and ever since then, my brother is the best father. You know, he's the best father. He's never put his hand on me, and he's changed. And if I did not take that stand, my brother would not have changed. And I am really, really proud that I did that. And so many people need to do that. In particular, I still see cases in my community of people going through that. So I just wanted to share that with you all, to know that even people like myself, you know, the people look at me and they're like, wow, Akec, your life is great. Even myself, I've gone through family violence as well. So to Mishka and Elvis, thank you so much for sharing your experiences today, and for giving me the platform to be able to share my experiences as well, because this is the first time that I've ever publicly spoken about it. So thank you all for creating a safe space so that I can share with you all. I'm now pleased to introduce Tanya Faha, Safe and Equals CEO, to the stage to share a few words. So welcome, Tanya.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'd just like to add my acknowledgements to country too, and in his absence, though, thank Tony for such a great welcome this morning, honest and heartfelt and real, so really appreciate it. As Akec mentioned, the Are You Safe at Home campaign started during COVID, but obviously after some really positive feedback, we really saw there's an opportunity to broaden this to everyday communities, and obviously within Victoria, but like Elvis said, there's nothing stopping it from staying in Victoria. It applies everywhere, in every state, every territory, and every jurisdiction across the world. So really it's about providing necessary tools and support with friends and family to engage with loved ones experiencing family violence. It might be the very thing that's needed to support survivors seeking help. And I just guess a personal reflection on what I just heard from Elvis and Mishka. It can mean everything, and it makes all the difference. They were two really important quotes I took out of that. And I think that friends and family, they are the first line of support. They're right there, they're there every day, and they make all the difference. Can I also just take the opportunity to thank Akec. What a great MC you've made, and adding your own personal story is a real privilege. So thank you very much. Obviously, thank you to Minister Williams, who not only gets the nuance of this, but is such a passionate advocate and is always available to attend our events. It's a privilege to have her here. I really want to thank the survivor advocates on stage, Mishka and Elvis. Thank you for sharing your experiences, always so honestly and authentically. We're grateful for everything you do on behalf of all survivor advocates and the support for our organisation. I really also acknowledge the personal toll these sorts of conversations take on you. So thank you, really sincerely thank you. I also want to thank our funders. This is a really important initiative that's made possible with the generous support from the State Government of Victoria and our philanthropic partners, Equitable Service State, Equity Trustees, Ernie Foundation, the Lord Mayor's Charitable Fund, and the William Buckland Foundation. It's really important because without these organisations, we cannot do events like this. So it's really important to acknowledge their contributions. So can I also just say, we're going to, at the end of this, we're going to play a few demonstrate some of the resources, including some of the quotes that Mishka was talking about, so some from a playbook around some of the quotes. So really, I think makes real some of the conversations that she had with her colleagues in the workplace. So, so without any further ado, Akec, I'm going to hand back over to you, and thank you everyone for being here. I loved it so much.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you for taking the mic. Who is the mic? Thank you so much, Tanya, and to the guys at Safe and Equal for all the work that you do. To have a peak body like you guys do this kind of advocacy work and doing the work is really important, and it gives people like Elvis, Mishka, myself, and others the opportunity to be able to, have those conversations and to be able to create a safe place at home for ourselves, because your home is supposed to be your safest place. And what Elvis said before, the importance of organizations being held accountable, because it is their responsibility to have these conversations, to have these events, so that everyone can feel safe. So thank you, and to the organizations for all that you do. I'd like to also thank to those who have joined us online today. Please head to the website areyousafeathome.org.au to find out about the campaign and how you can get involved with that Are You Safe at Home's Day. It's an important day, and it's a day that we should really make global, not only in Australia, but not only just in Victoria, but it should be a global campaign. So thank you for tuning in today. Lastly, if you'd like to talk to one of the speakers here today individually, please advise